which will give you actually do the much longer practice. And part of that practice is you're purifying your negative karma from this life and past lives. And there's a lot in there, but this is just sort of a shorthand version for those of us who have done it. And it just reminds us what it's about. And then the last prayer we'll do is what's called the mandala offering. And what we're imagining here, and you can sort of forget about the words that are there and just imagine in your mind what a purified universe would look like to you. You know, purified consciousness, purified form, all forms purified, all consciousness purified, everything is working in a very harmonious, interdependent way, you know, that's beneficial all the way around. So that you just imagine that kind of thing, and then you're offering it to the Buddha, you know, offering to this being who is teaching, has these teachings, and that we continue to, through the Buddha's teachings, follow this path. That's what these beginning prayers are about. So we will go ahead and start then. And we can do the Tibetan transliteration and the little song melody that goes with it. So we'll do this first one 3 times. Sangye chodang sogi chognam la Jangchu bardu dakni kyapsuchi Daki chenyen gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodang soki chognam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyatsuchi Dagi chenyen gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodang soki chognam la Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Daki chenyen gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye duparsho. And then the next, the 4 immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And now we'll go to the next page and the 7-limb prayer. And just do your best, Crystal, just imagine, visualize whatever comes to your mind when we're reading these words. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning with time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara, or cyclic existence, ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And finally, the mandala offering, where we visualize purified forms, purified universe, purified consciousness. Saji perki jokchimeto Pramri rablingji Nide gyempadi Sangye jindu migderwagi Drokun Achila Chepasyo Idam Guru Ratnamandala Kam Niriataya. Okay. Well, hello, you beautiful people. Who's this on the phone? Is this Anne?
Eleanor.
Eleanor, it's probably Eleanor. Okay.
Just a wild guess.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Eleanor. How are you doing?
are you?
We're good. We're good. So today we're going to continue with the second topic in the initial scope of the Lam Rim. Crystal, the Lam Rim is uh, uh, it's the graduated levels, graduated stages of the path to enlightenment. And it's sort of, it's separated into what they call three scopes. There's an initial scope, there's an intermediate scope, and there's a great scope or advanced scope. And it's very similar to, you know, if we have the goal, you know, our final goal is to get our PhD and a doctorate in something, and, you know, so we all start at grade school or even preschool, grade school. That would be similar to, in Buddhism, what would be, if we want the goal of becoming an enlightened being to help all sentient beings, then we're going to start at the initial scope. This would be like the grade school level. It's extremely important. You can't go to university if you don't go to grade school. So then the next level, the intermediate level, would be like middle school and high school. You know, again, extremely important for if we're going to get our doctorate or PhD, and it's extremely important if we're going to become enlightened. And then the final scope was with the grade scope, is the practices that actually will transform your mind so that you will become enlightened. And this has to do with what they call great compassion, great love, great compassion. It's a understanding of the nature of reality combined with this great compassion, this desire, this altruistic intention to be a benefit to all sentient beings, because the nature of reality is that everything is interdependent. We are all interconnected. It makes no sense to, you know, go off in some kind of nirvana, a solitary nirvana, when your actual reality is an interdependent connection with all sentient beings and all things. So that's the idea of the advanced scope. So we are on the initial scope. We're on grade school level, which is it actually, the initial scope is pretty advanced when you start to get into it, because today's topic, there is a lot to cover here, and we're actually going to, I mean, we're talking about the initial scope, but we're going to get into some very deep topics that have to do with impermanence and permanence and emptiness, having to do with the benefits of remembering death. So this is the second meditation topic of the initial scope, the benefits of remembering death. We did the first part of it last week, and so I'll do a review of that, what we did last week. In the second meditation topic of the initial Lam Rim, we talked about the error we make by misconceiving the impermanence of our life as if it was permanent. We're always thinking, I won't die today, I won't die today. And we continually think this way until the very moment of our death. When the day comes that we do die, it will be a day that we call today. Even though we've been saying all along, I won't die today, well, we will die on a day that we call today. When we don't think about death, all we really do is pursue the interests of this life: money, material possessions, gratifying relationships, reputation, and sense pleasures. If we have any kind of Dharma practice, we don't practice regularly or properly because we're mainly concerned with our present worldly pleasure. We don't want to face death. We don't want to face the reality of it. And so we make death fearful by pushing it out of our mind. The Dharma approach to death is to face it honestly. It puts us in touch with reality, and it gives energy and meaning to our Dharma practice. Remembering death gives us a framework with which we can look at our life, appreciate it, and take full advantage of the opportunities that we have right now. So we talked about 6 disadvantages of not remembering death. The first one, if we don't remember death, we won't remember the Dharma. If we don't remember death, we'll get completely caught up in the demands and activities of this life. We don't think about our impermanence and the fact that we're going to leave this life. Without properly thinking about this fact, we don't think about the necessity of the Dharma. And if we don't think the Dharma is necessary, we'll have very little motivation to practice it. So the second disadvantage, even if we do remember the Dharma, we won't practice it. Because we're always thinking, I won't die today, I won't die today. We forever put off our Dharma practice and don't feel any urgency about it. And in the meantime, while we're not practicing our Dharma, the human life is just running out moment by moment by moment, by day, by year, by month, you know? The third disadvantage, even if we do practice, we won't do it properly. Because we don't remember death, even if we do practice, we won't practice purely because our mind mixes our Dharma practice with what are called the 8 worldly dharmas, also known as the 8 worldly concerns. And we covered these in depth last week. These are attachment to having material things and aversion to not having them. 2, attachment to well, these are actually 8 things, but they're in pairs of 2, or pairs of 2. Again, the first one, attachment to having material things and aversion to not having them. The second is attachment to praise and aversion to blame. The third is attachment to having a good reputation and aversion to having a bad one. And the fourth is attachment to pleasant sensations and aversion to unpleasant sensations. With these 8 worldly dharmas, the essential point to remember is that the problem doesn't lie with having material things or being praised or having a good reputation or experiencing pleasant sensations. That's all fine. The problem lies in the mind's habitual attachment to having these things and the mind's habitual aversion to experiencing the opposite of these things. That's what we need to be focusing on. It's okay to have, it's actually helpful to have a good reputation. It's helpful to have material things. That's not the problem. It's in our mind, how we view it. All right, the fourth disadvantage that we covered last week. Even if we remember the Dharma, we won't practice it consistently. If we don't remember death, then our craving for the things of this life just keeps increasing. We develop attachment, hostility, and ignorance. The reason we develop attachment, hostility, and ignorance is because we, number one, ignorance, we don't really understand. We don't have a direct experience of what the actual nature of reality is. And so we see things out there and we become very attached to them and want them, whatever they may be. It can be a physical thing, it can be something, it can be a relationship, it can be an idea that you have about yourself. We become attached to that. When that attachment that we have is thwarted and we don't get the thing we want, then what's called aversion arises. Anger, jealousy, anxiety, fear, depression. These are all part of what happens when our attachment doesn't get what it wants. So when we don't remember death, we just follow like you know, on a lead of our ignorance, our attachment, and our aversion. We just follow it. We don't think of the long-term consequences of our negative actions that we engage in because of these afflictive emotions. When we're angry, when we're jealous, when we're filled with pride, we can do things and say things that are very destructive, you know, and harmful to ourselves and others. And the more we get involved in these negative actions, because we're not remembering our death, and so we're not remembering the Dharma, our mind becomes much more obscured. It becomes more difficult for us to practice, and we get more confused. And finally, the sixth disadvantage of not remembering death is that at the time of death, we die with regrets. When we're dying, we'll look back on our life and we'll ask ourselves, what have I done? How has my life been meaningful? If we haven't remembered our death throughout our life, we'll see that we've spent our time either pursuing our own interests or being resentful that we weren't able to pursue them because of our circumstances. That's a big one. I mean, we can die We can go through our life with a lot of resentment because we think we were, we didn't have a good childhood, or my parents didn't do the right thing, or my boss is a creep, and on and on and on. We think we are unhappy because of these external circumstances, when it's really we're unhappy because our mind is not viewing things in the correct way. And this is how remembering death and remembering the Dharma is going to help us. So if we die without having remembered the Dharma and not practicing, then we won't have brought the Dharma into all of our life circumstances because we didn't practice consistently or purely. And we'll realize that we haven't made the Dharma part of our mind stream, our consciousness, and we'll have difficulty relaxing our mind and making it peaceful before we die. When we remember our death, we become energized and motivated to realize our own potential. And our own potential, as I was saying before, is that we have what is called within our consciousness itself, the nature of our consciousness itself is the potential to remove all of our misconceptions, all of our afflictive emotions, all of these delusions, and have complete clarity about who we are and what reality is. And because of that, we can then blossom, sort of like a lotus flower blossoms, into all these magnificent qualities that would come about because of that. Loving kindness, generosity, compassion, patience, wisdom. All of this is the potential that we have. If we remember our death, then we're energized and motivated to realize that potential. It gives us a way of looking at our life so we can live more peacefully now and prepare for our future lives. We come to see the benefit of Dharma practice because when we die, it's our Dharma practice that comes with us. It's what's in our mind stream. It's what's in our consciousness. According to Buddhism, consciousness is eternal, it's beginningless, and it's endless. And what we have in our consciousness is what we take with us when we pass away and then move on to an intermediate state and then a next rebirth. That's what so this is why it's so important to remember death, because it means that if we practice the Dharma, then we will have transformed our consciousness to some degree that's beneficial, and that's what we'll take with us. We won't lose any of that when we go to our next life. Our habitual training in good qualities creates a propensity in our consciousness that lets those good qualities continue on into a future life. It's the good karma we create by practicing Dharma that is going to influence what happens to us in a future life. Remembering death helps us see the value of Dharma, and it helps us set our priorities. We won't get so wrapped up in seemingly important things that seem important only because we're looking through a very narrow-mindedly view, through a lens of our happiness now, my happiness now, what do I need? So now we're going to move on to the second part of this initial scope meditation topic. And these are the benefits of remembering death. And Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the, Lama Tsongkhapa was a 14th century Tibetan monk and yogi, really, who is the sort of the founder of the Gelug tradition in Buddhism. The Tibetan Gelug tradition, that's the tradition of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and our Tibetan teachers are part of that Gelug tradition. Therefore, that's what we've been taught. Lama Tsongkhapa, it was the founder of that tradition, and he took this. Remember I talked about the Lam Rim, this graduated path all the way to enlightenment. He refined that and put it into a form. There's I don't know if I even have the books out here, but there's a book that exists now, which is his, back from the 14th century, which is his commentary on these stages of the path to enlightenment. And since then, many teachers have made commentaries up to the present day. So Lama Tsongkhapa said in his great treatise on the stages of the path, the thought that you will not die is the source of all deterioration. And the remedy for this is to remember death, the source of all that is excellent. Consequently, you shouldn't think that this is a practice for those who don't have something more profound to cultivate in their meditation. Nor should you think that although this is something worthy of meditation, you should cultivate it just a little at the beginning of the meditation session because it's not suitable for continual practice. Rather, you should be certain from the depths of your heart that remembering death is necessary in the beginning of your practice, it's necessary in the middle of the path, and it's necessary at the end of the path, and then cultivate it in meditation. So here are 6 advantages of remembering death. In Buddhism, they're very organized and they put things into lists and numbers and things like that, and it is helpful. So here's the first advantage of remembering death. 1, it is most beneficial. As the Buddha said in the Great Final Nirvana Sutra, among all harvests, the autumn harvest is supreme. Among all tracks, the track of the elephant is supreme, presumably because it's so big and you can easily follow it. And among all ideas, the idea of impermanence and death is supreme, because with it, you eliminate all the attachment, ignorance, and pride of the 3 realms of cyclic existence, which are the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. We won't get into that right now. But we are in what is called cyclic existence right now. And we're in what is called the desire realm, which actually means when you're always desiring something, I need, it means we're never satisfied. So I like to say we're in the dissatisfaction realm, because that's the nature of it. Okay. In other words, based on what the Buddha said here, in other words, we'll practice the Dharma flawlessly when we remember death, because we'll want to achieve a good rebirth after we die. We'll practice generosity, ethics, patience, and so on. Remembering death will keep us engaged and energized through the whole Lam Rim, through the initial scope, the intermediate scope, and the great scope, right up to our complete enlightenment. Many of the great Tibetan Tibetan adepts would hold cups made of human skulls and trumpets made of human bones to keep the awareness of death and impermanence present in their minds. The written rules and procedures of the Buddhist monastics, it's called the Vinaya. The Vinaya talks about keeping drawings of skeletons in bathhouses and other gathering places for the same reason. We've got I'm sure those of you who have been here can remember this little guy. We keep him here all the time. This is sort of like one of those Day of the Dead kind of things, but it always reminds us. I mean, he's always here in the living room, and it always reminds us that death is coming, our life is impermanent, and so what are we going to do about it? So past masters have said, if we don't recall death and impermanence when we wake up in the morning, we'll devote the morning to this life. If we don't recall death and impermanence at noon, we'll devote the afternoon to this life. And if we devote ourselves to this life, whatever we do will not be Dharma. All right, here's the second advantage. That was the first one. It's most beneficial. The second is it's most powerful. If we remember death and impermanence, it's said that we will destroy all attachment, all aversion, and all ignorance. That's a big promise there, recalling death. We will have great power to complete the 2 accumulations of merit and wisdom. The spiritual masters say it's like a hammer that destroys all of our delusions and wrong actions in one bang. So it's powerful. The third advantage of remembering death is it's important at the beginning of our practice of the path. If we remember death at the beginning of our Dharma studies, it acts as a cause for us to make a start on the Dharma path. It motivates us to get going and begin practicing. When we can logically see that our negative actions based on the 3 poisons of attachment, aversion, and ignorance are the causes for our present unhappiness and suffering, we'll want to turn our life situation around while we have the opportunity to do it, which is now. So it's important at the beginning. The fourth advantage is that it's important in the meantime or in the middle of the path. While we're progressing on the path, remembering death acts as a condition that stimulates us to work steadily and energetically at the Dharma. When we remember death, we'll familiarize ourselves with the Dharma by taking on a meditation practice. And we'll bring the Dharma teachings and concepts into our daily circumstances, our activities, and our tasks. We talked about this last week, little things that we normally do. I mean, just a good example is, you're sweeping the floor, you're cleaning the floor. Well, you can think, well, I'm sweeping away all of my ignorance, all of my attachment, all of my aversion, and I'm growing my wisdom. I'm growing the broom is the water of wisdom, and so you can, any kind of task, anything you do, you can bring the Dharma into it. There's a whole list of things that we talked about last week, and that's something that you can download last week's talk. So we'll bring the Dharma into our daily life, and when we understand that our positive habitual thoughts, words, and actions will create a strong karmic propensity in our mind stream, and that it will ensure a beneficial rebirth for us in the future, we will remember death. And then the fifth advantage, so that was it's important at the beginning, important in the middle, and the fifth is it's important at the end. At the end of the path, remembering death will bring our Dharma practice through to completion with the achievement of enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So that is the end of the path, the achievement of enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So it's not like anything ends there. It's, in a way, it's just the beginning, just the beginning. So here is and here's the sixth one, the sixth advantage. We'll die happily and gladly. At death, we'll have the confidence that comes from having practiced the Dharma continually and without error. It will be a strong habitual propensity in our mind stream that will see us through to a fortunate rebirth. It is said that the best Dharma practitioners are happy to die, the medium ones die gracefully, and the least ones have no regrets. They feel, I managed to practice Dharma well, it will be easy for me to die now. So here is the actual way to remember death. And it's a 9-point meditation on death that consists of instructions taken from Lama Tsongkhapa's works, Pabanka Rinpoche's teachings, which are in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, and the very insightful teachings of Venerable Thupten Chodron that are specifically geared towards students of Buddhism in the West today. It contains special points drawn from each of these teachers' own experiences. So the 9-point meditation on death. This 9-point meditation has 3 main points or 3 main headings. And then their 3 reasons are given for each main point, making 9 points of meditation in all. So the 3 main points or 3 main headings are: 1, death is certain. 2, the time of death is uncertain. And 3, nothing can help at the time of death except the Dharma. So here's the first main point. Death is certain. And here's the first reason of 3 reasons why death is certain. Reason 1, death will inevitably come and no circumstance can prevent it. Without question, all of us are going to die. No matter what sort of body we have, no matter where we go, no matter what we try to do and how hard we try to do it, we can't stop death. We can easily see this from our own observation and experience. The Buddha's final teaching centered on impermanence in order to show that this meditation is fundamental. So as he is dying, he said, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, meaning everything that comes into being due to causes and conditions is going to come into being, is going to sort of grow, generate, decay, disintegrate, and transform. I mean, the one way of thinking of death is it's a transformation. we were going to be transforming into something other than what we are right now. Hopefully, it'll be another human body, a precious human body that we can keep practicing the Dharma with. So the Buddha demonstrated this as his last teaching by himself leaving his body, showing that even the Buddha is impermanent. This is something that sort of, when I first heard this, I went, what? I mean, I thought the Buddha, is beginningless and endless, but beginningless and endless has nothing to do with being impermanent. Impermanent has to do with moment by moment, the ability to change. So the Buddha obviously has a mind like we do, and the mind is always changing, and it can see a situation for a particular being. It knows, because a Buddha is omniscient, knows exactly how to help that being in a way that's going to be the most helpful for that being. I mean, so the Buddha is an impermanent being. Buddha's bodies, the kind of bodies that a Buddha takes on, they're changeable, they're impermanent. This is what impermanent means. So often we think impermanent means it's just going to go away. But in Buddhism, impermanent has the connotation of meaning changing moment to moment to moment to moment. And permanence has the meaning it doesn't change at all. It stays the same always, okay? So that's the first reason why death is certain, that we're going to die no matter what, and we are impermanent. Reason 2, nothing is being added to your lifespan, and it's always being subtracted from. The next reason that death is certain is that each moment brings us closer and closer to death. From the moment of our conception, we're on a track that will inevitably end in our death. We don't even get a moment's rest in this. It's said written in the sayings of the Buddha, suppose one stretches out a string and a child follows it bit by bit, by bit, by bit, by bit. The child will eventually come to the end of the string. So it is with people's lives. Then the Buddha said, those who are up for slaughter, like sheep, get closer to their executioner with every step they take. So it is with people's lives. Just as sheep being led to slaughter get closer to death with every step, at no time, once we are born, do we deviate from the direction of our death. We don't like to think of it in terms of slaughter, but just the same, we've already used up much of our lifespan, and there's no telling how much of it is left. We use up our breaths, our minutes, our hours, our days, our months, and our years. The day is coming when we will die. Our so-called time to go can come suddenly, so we shouldn't be complacent and think, well, I won't die today. Even when we're sleeping, all comfy and cozy, we are still heading inevitably toward our death. And here's the third reason why death is certain. You will definitely die before getting around to practicing the Dharma. The third reason that death is certain, especially in how it impacts our Dharma practice, is that relatively speaking, life is extremely short. It is. It's definitely possible that we could die before we ever get around to practicing the Dharma. Say we live for 60 years, many people do. If we sleep for 8 hours each night, 20 years of our life is used up just doing that. The other 40 years are interrupted by the amount of time we spend eating, cleaning, getting an education, working, shopping, maintaining ourselves, maintaining our stuff and our property, and on and on and on. This leaves maybe 7 years or so to devote to Dharma practice, but things keep coming up. Holidays, entertaining, watching movies, taking trips, playing games, going on vacations, naps. Despite our many intentions to practice, it seems every year goes by in a blur of responsibilities and distractions as we get closer to death. Guntang Rinpoche said, perhaps 20 years of being unaware of practice, perhaps 20 years of going to practice, perhaps another 10 years of never did practice. That's the story of an empty and wasted human life. There's a story the teachers tell in this context about an old man who says, "This is the story of my wasted life. The first 20 years were spent playing and getting an education. The second 20 years I spent working and supporting my family. And the third 20 years, I'm too old to practice. All I can do now is recite prayers for my next rebirth." If we have this idea of later, I'll practice the Dharma after I've done all these other things, that may not necessarily happen. We're always in the middle of doing something else. We won't have completed everything we're doing when death comes. We really have to be aware of this. Death is certain, it's inevitable. We have no choice but to come to the conclusion that because death is inevitable, there's no way to get around it. Therefore, we should practice the Dharma. We should transform our minds, because this certain inevitable thing can be a pleasant experience. So if we can use our life wisely, then we'll be able to face the greatest challenge of our life. All right, here's the second main point of the advantages of the 9-point meditation. The second main point is the time of death is uncertain. And there are 3 reasons for this. So here's the first reason. The lifespan of people is not fixed. We may recognize that death is certain and that it's important to practice the Dharma, but we may still have this idea that we can get to it later. I mean, I've done this, I've said, I'm too tired this morning. I'll wake up early tomorrow morning and I'll meditate. Or Kavita and I do this all the time. We've got too much to do today. We can attend a Dharma teaching another time. Or we'll say, I know there are Dharma teachings online. I really want to watch this movie right now. I'll watch some teachings later. I mean, Kavita and I do that too. Or we'll say, I've done this. I know I should read these writings on emptiness by Nagarjuna, but man, they are so complicated and the language is so hard to understand. I think maybe I'll just look at this kind of new agey book with nice pictures because it makes me feel good, and I'll get back to Nagarjuna later. So we're always going to do it later. And so with this second heading, the time of death is uncertain, we begin to think that the time of death is uncertain. We're not really sure how long we're going to live. We always want to postpone our practice until later, but in actual fact, we're never certain we're going to have time to practice later. Why? Because the time of death is uncertain. And the first reason is because the lifespan of people is not fixed. If you think of when you got up this morning, when we got up this morning, right? And we think of right now, many people who were alive this morning are now dead. Probably the majority of those people who were alive this morning and are dead now didn't think when they woke up this morning, I'm going to die today. Even someone who's sick in the hospital, they usually wake up in the morning and they think, I'm going to live today, I'm not going to die. But death happens all the time. Most of us don't think that we'll never die, but until we are dying, we always have the thought, I'll die someday, but not this year. We may think we have reasons to feel this way. Some of us might think, I won't die yet because I'm young. But being young is no guarantee. Death can happen at any age. Many children die young and their parents have to bury them. We have friends whose 9-year-old son died in their arms from a congenital heart disease. Many people younger than us have already died. Some die as soon as they're born. Some die while they're still in the womb. When I was little, I was like, 5 years old. My mother had a miscarriage well into her 4th pregnancy. Some of us think, I won't die because I'm not ill. But being healthy is not a guarantee. People may be ill and confined to their beds, but don't die, while many healthy people die sudden deaths. In the past year alone, I've seen numerous videos on the internet of athletes soccer players, tennis players, football players. These are people in the prime of their life, in peak condition, and they drop dead right on the playing field from some unknown cause. It happens. People go to work thinking they're going to come home and they don't make it home. Some people die in the middle of a meal without ever having had the slightest reason to think they would die before they'd finished eating. Hello, Tashi. Our cat Tashi had an accident and broke his leg, and so he's limping around, but he's recovering. He's recovering nicely. Yeah, people die in unexpected ways. Kavita and I knew this really bright, funny, energetic lady who came to the River City cluster of dog shows here in San Antonio, where Kavita and I ran the official dog show t-shirt booth. Every year, this lady would march up to the booth with 3 or 4 of her poodles on a leash, and then she'd, very flamboyantly and very funny, and she was very entertaining. She would buy t-shirts for herself and for all of the dogs. So one year, she didn't show up, and everybody was wondering where she was. She was always such a regular presence at that show. Well, they found her dead in her hotel bathtub after having had a heart attack. The poodles were okay. So how can we be so sure that we won't die tomorrow? Other than preparing a will and perhaps arranging for our burial plans, we make very little preparation for the death that we're sure to experience. It's not certain that we'll live to an old age, yet we make all kinds of plans for an enjoyable retirement. We can't even be sure who among us sitting here right now is going to die first. We're not going to get a text message someday that says, ding, time's up, get ready to die now. Death is going to come all of a sudden to us, and we'll just have to leave whatever we're doing. Grasping at permanence tricks us into thinking we have many years left, but the time will come. Time's up, get ready to die now. People die at every age. This innate feeling inside us that I have forever or it will happen later is a complete hallucination because there is no guarantee, absolutely none. It's really helpful to think deeply about this because then each day when we wake up, we'll feel like our life is very precious. We're still alive. We'll think, I want to make my life useful. I want to make it meaningful. Here's the second reason why the time of death is uncertain. There are more chances of dying and less chances of remaining alive. This sounds pretty funny, but think of it this way. If we lie down, right, and we don't move, we don't do anything, eventually we're going to die, aren't we? Our bodies don't stay alive by themselves. We have to feed them. We have to protect them from the elements. We have to give them medicine. We have to exert a lot of effort just to keep the body alive. If we didn't exert any effort, the body would just automatically die. It's so much easier to die than to stay alive. Our whole life requires effort just to stay alive. And then so many of the things that we create that contribute to our quality of life and well-being can actually become the cause of our death. This is again why there are so many more chances of dying than staying alive. For instance, we make cars to make our life easier, but over 1.25 million people are killed on the road each year. We make houses to protect us from the elements and wild animals, but houses collapse in earthquakes and mudslides and kill their inhabitants. We create all sorts of modern appliances to make our life easier, and we electrocute ourselves with them. Even the food we eat is supposed to keep us alive, but people can swallow their food the wrong way, get it stuck in their windpipe, choke on it, and die. Food poisoning can strike anybody at any time and can result in death. Our life force is like a candle in the wind. As Nagarjuna says, we live surrounded by the factors of death, like an oil lamp in a draft. Here's the third reason. The third reason that the time of death is uncertain is that our bodies are extremely fragile. We feel big and strong now, maybe, But we've all observed how one little virus that we can't even see with our eyes can kill us. So many things can kill this big body of ours. Little insects, scorpions and spiders, little animals, poisonous frogs and snakes, they can kill us. Our skin is really easy to break. The bones aren't that difficult to break either. One treacherous fall from a ladder can do it. When I was little, my best friend's father was painting their house on a ladder and he fell and killed himself. I mean, it happens. So it's helpful when we're doing this meditation to think about this in terms of ourselves, to think about how so many things that are supposed to be conducive for life can become the cause of our death. To recognize that we are always in the middle of doing something, but that's no guarantee we're not going to die. Everybody who's dying is always in the middle of doing something. We often think, I can't die now, I've got too much work to do. But when are we ever going to really finish our work? There's nothing that can actually give us a sense of security or to put off the feeling of death. When we understand the first main point of this meditation, that death is certain, we'll want to practice the Dharma. When we understand the second main point, that the time of death is uncertain, we'll get the feeling, I want to practice the Dharma now. It's not enough to say, I'll get to it later. We'll think, I really want to make this an important thing in my life now, because I may not have tomorrow to practice. As Lama Zopa says, your future rebirth can come before tomorrow. And yet look how much time we spend planning for tomorrow and for the rest of our life. How much time do we spend preparing for our future rebirth? This meditation helps bring us back to the present so that we become wise and alert while we're alive, and we take some control of our life, and we stop letting ourselves run on autopilot. And here's the third main point. Nothing can help at the time of death except the Dharma. And here are the reasons. Wealth cannot help. This is the first reason. Nothing can help us at the time of death except the Dharma is a point that really strikes at the heart of the matter we're talking about. For instance, wealth can't help us. We spend our whole life trying so hard to get money, trying to get material security, trying to get possessions, buying clothes, getting houses, cars, and other comforts. Yet at the time we die, does any of it come with us? It's not like, the ancient Egyptians where they buried everything with them. Do any of our possessions come with us? Does any of our money come with us? None of it. Yet we spend our whole life working for it. And we have nothing to show at the end of our life, except perhaps some negative karma we might have created in the process of seeking after all these material possessions. Negative karma created by cheating other people, or by clinging and being miserly, or by taking things that belong to other people, or by getting angry at other people who damage our possessions. All this stuff that we've worked so hard to get and to hold on to comes to nothing at the time of death. And worse than that, our family and relatives often fight over who gets it. You may be lying on your deathbed and family members are asking you to sign this and sign that. Who's going to get this? Who's going to get that? It's incredible what happens in families sometimes when somebody dies. People fight over who gets the jewelry and who gets the stocks and bonds. So can you imagine working your whole life to get material possessions for you and your family, and all your kids or your brothers and sisters are fighting over them while you're trying to die? Or worse, you've made a will ahead of time and your spouse or child tries to make you change it on your deathbed. I personally know someone who actually did this. They brought a notary public into the room where the person was dying and had them change their will because they didn't like what this person had decided to do with their money. Wealth does absolutely nothing for us at the time of death. When we're dead, it doesn't matter whether we died on a soft, comfortable bed or whether we died in the gutter. It really doesn't matter after we're dead. It doesn't help us to accumulate wealth with a clinging, grasping mind, thinking that we need so many things because the world says we do. We buy expensive plots at the cemetery. We pre-order them. We pre-order expensive gravestones. It's really quite a business. I've seen it in action. How does any of that help us at the time of our death? Venerable Tipton Chudrin talks about a Chinese custom, this is really funny, of burning paper money to send wealth with their relatives on to the next world. They don't burn real money, of course, so they spend real money to buy paper money. And then they burn bunches of paper money and paper houses and all this paper stuff to send on to their relatives. Do you think these things ever get there? Do you think it helps the person who died? We do need a certain amount of wealth to live and to stay alive. We have to be practical, but the mind that is obsessed with it and accumulates it, or the mind that can't share and can't give, or the mind that creates negative karma by lying, stealing, cheating, or whatever in order to have possessions, those kinds of minds are really useless to us when we die. Here's the second reason. Friends and relatives can't help us when we die either. We put so much emphasis on attachment, clinging to friends and relatives, depending on them, needing them. Another person can become so much a part of our own ego identity that we don't know who we are if we separate from them. We think we can't live without this person. And yet, at the time of death, we do separate and they can't come with us. No matter how much they love us, they can't stop us from dying. Even if the whole world loves us, there are some people like this. I'm thinking like Princess Diana. The whole world loves you and everyone's praying, you know, well, she already died, but if you say you're dying in the process of dying, please live, don't die. It would be like if the Dalai Lama's on his deathbed, right? And everybody's going, please, please, please live, right? We can't do anything to stop the Dalai Lama from dying if his time to die. So when we have this mind of clinging attachment, we'll very easily put off Dharma practice to have the kinds of relationships and experiences that our ego thinks it really needs to be happy. This self-grasping mind distracts us from what's truly valuable. It thinks, if only I can make this relationship work, I'll be happy, I'll be fulfilled. But we're never fulfilled. I mean, remember, this is the desire realm. We're always dissatisfied. When we die and the person we think we can't live without stays behind us, then what? No matter how popular we are, no matter how good our reputation is, how much people love us, or how many friends we have, at the time we die and it's over. They can't stop it. And if we've created a lot of negative karma because of the attachment we have to our clinging, needy relationships with other people, then even though those people can't come with us at death, all that negative karma does, and it stays with us in our mind stream. If we've lied to protect our loved ones, if we've slandered other people to protect our loved ones, if we've criticized and blamed and yelled and screamed at other people because they harmed our loved ones, we can create negative karma. We cheat other people to get more things for the person we love. People even kill to protect the person they love. We generate so much negative karma in the name of love, which is actually very often a lot of attachment mixed with some love. And then at the time we die, there's nothing to do but separate. There's no choice. It's not that we should give away all of our wealth and give up all of our relationships. That's not the point. The point is, if we cling to the wealth, if we cling to friends and relatives, problems will arise. Because with the clinging, we develop wrong, mistaken motivations. This leads to negative actions. With the clinging, we neglect our Dharma practice and try to get all of our happiness out of our friends and relatives and possessions. The solution is to give up the clinging, to give up the attachment. We have to really recognize what wealth can and cannot do for us, and what our friends and relatives can and cannot do for us. Very often when we're involved in clinging relationships, when it comes to die, the other person who is also clinging to us becomes immobilized. If the Dharma or something similar to it has never been at the center of that relationship, they'll be incapable of helping us through the death process. Instead, what they'll do is they'll sit by our side, they'll cry, they'll grasp our hand, and they'll say, please don't die. How am I ever going to live without you? How could we possibly die peacefully if there's a crying person in the room clinging to us and we're clinging to them? Friendships are very important. Being affectionate with other people is very important, but we really have to keep the Dharma as the focus of our friendship and our affection, so that we can accept our Dharma friend's death. We want to have the clarity of mind to be able to help each other at death time, and to encourage each other in the Dharma, to remind each other when we're dying to take refuge, to make prayers, and cultivate altruism, and think of emptiness at the time of death. Then our friendships become really meaningful, really important, and very, very worthwhile. And here's the third reason. At the time of death, even our body can't help us. The body that's been our most intimate possession and companion since we were born. Sometimes we haven't been with our wealth, and we haven't always been with our friends and relatives, but our body, our most cherished possession, we spend so much time taking such good care of it. We feed it, we exercise it, give it vitamins and medicines. We worry about it, fret over it, pamper it, and we feed it some more. We cut our hair, we grow our hair. We style our hair, we color our hair. We clean our fingernails, we polish our toenails, we trim our beard, we get nose jobs, eye jobs, facelifts, silicone injections, cosmetic surgery, tummy tucks, and lap bands. So much attention to our body. We decorate it, glorify it, and try to make it smell really good, and then we feed it again. And what does it do for us at the end of the day? It dies. It's like sand through our fingers. There's nothing there to hold on to. We spend our whole life attached to our body, creating so much negative karma centered around this body. Look at it. We fight wars to protect our body. We fight to protect our wealth. We kill, we steal, we slander, to protect our body, friends and relatives, and our wealth. But at the end of the day, all of that stays behind. The friends, the wealth, the body. It all stays behind. And we go somewhere else without any of that. So what is the use of all the attachment and creating all that negative karma? What's the purpose? It doesn't make any sense. The mind that clings to this body, that doesn't want to let the body go, that's what makes death terrifying. Because we have this primal fear. If I don't have this body, who will I be? If I don't have this ego identity, if I'm not a certain race or gender or nationality, who am I going to be? That clinging mind is what makes death so fearful. Because at death, it's so clear we have to separate from our body. If we can work during our life to get rid of this clinging to the body, clinging to our ego identity, then when we die, it could be so easy and so pleasant. It would help us out a lot also while we're still alive. So we should really contemplate this. We should sit down and spend some time thinking over these 3 points, these 3 reasons why nothing can help us at the time of death except the Dharma. We should ask ourselves, how much time do I spend accumulating wealth and possessions? What kind of karma do I create in relationship to this wealth and these possessions? Can these be of any benefit to me when I die? And then do the same with your friends and relatives. How much do I cling to this friend? How much do I cling to this relative? How attached to them am I? Is there anyone I feel I couldn't live without? Is there any negative karma I've created in relation to them? Think about this really deeply. Then do the same with your body. How much time do I spend thinking about my body, feeding my body, looking at it, pampering it, cleaning it, fussing over it, worrying about it? What kind of negative karma am I creating in relation to my body by how I think about it and what I do with it? Can my body be of any benefit to me when we die? We'll come to see that Dharma practice is the only meaningful thing for us at the time we die. Because when we die, we leave everything else other than our mental transformation behind. In other words, if we spend our life cultivating loving kindness, that's going to go with us. We'll die peacefully. We'll have a strong imprint of loving kindness. When we get to the next life, whatever it is, it will become very easy to meditate on loving kindness again because it's become a propensity in our mind stream through our habit. When we spend our life really trying to act constructively toward others, then all the imprints of those actions come with us to the next life. All that good karma, all that positive potential, that's our real wealth. That's what makes us feel mentally and spiritually rich. And that all can come with us when we die. All the mind training, the different attitudes that we try to develop, the different aspects of our mind that we try to increase to really make them blossom, all that work we do now makes it so much easier for those same attitudes to arise again in future lives. Any positive mental transformation comes with us. And not only does it come with us, but it's also what makes us happy now. Happy when we're dying and happy in a future life. We can see quite directly that if we spend our time, let's say, developing loving kindness, rather than worrying about how we look, we're going to be a lot happier now, a lot happier when we're dying, and a lot happier in our future lives. So that concludes the 9-point meditation on death. And this whole talk, I've got it down on paper, and I'm going to I'll put it in a link, I guess probably tomorrow or maybe later today, so that you can download it and look at this. Yeah, tomorrow. Well, I've got too much to do today. I'll do it tomorrow. Okay.
It's not bad. We're having some.
Yeah, we're having friends over. Yeah.
It's not that I've gotten slaving away.
Okay, so now we're going to get into something really pretty interesting in the last part of this second meditation topic. It's remembering death, and we're remembering impermanence and death. So we're going to talk about impermanence and death now. As we said before, transience or impermanence was the Buddha's last teaching. It was also his first teaching. The first thing he taught was the fact that everything is changing from moment to moment, that nothing remains static or stable. And he demonstrated this as his last teaching by leaving his body, showing that even the Buddha is impermanent. So let's talk about the difference between eternal and permanent, and non-eternal and impermanent. We need to be clear about the difference of these, because the words permanent and impermanent in English are a little bit different from the way they're used in Buddhism. The word eternal means it lasts forever without end. For example, our mind stream is an eternal phenomenon, according to Buddhism. It has no beginning, and it goes on without end. Something that is non-eternal would be our body, or a piece of paper, or a cup, because they come into existence and they go out of existence. Something can be eternal, and also impermanent. Impermanent means changing moment to moment to moment to moment. So something like our mind stream is eternal, it lasts forever, but it's also impermanent because it changes moment to moment to moment. Just look at your own consciousness, your own mind. It changes moment to moment. So does the body, so does a piece of paper, so does everything else around us. It's changing from moment to moment. Permanent in Buddhism parlance means something that does not change moment to moment. Now, here's where we have to wrap our heads around this and put our thinking caps on, okay? An example of permanent would be the emptiness of inherently existing phenomena. The emptiness of inherently existing phenomena. Since what emptiness means a lack or an absence of existing in an impossible way. When we talk about emptiness, say emptiness of a cup, for example, we're talking about the lack of this cup being able to exist in some impossible way, such as inherently existing without any causes or conditions whatsoever. As if this cup existed entirely unto itself, like some kind of entity of the cup that was utterly independent of everything except itself. That's what it means when we're saying the emptiness of inherently existing phenomena. It means that nothing exists that way. It's impossible. Okay? This clearly, it's not the case with the cup. It changes from moment to moment and eventually goes out of existence. The cup itself is an impermanent phenomenon, but the emptiness of the cup existing inherently is a fact that doesn't change from moment to moment, as long as this cup exists. Therefore, the fact of the emptiness of the cup existing inherently is the permanent phenomenon, not the cup itself. The cup itself exists as a dependently arising phenomenon. And that is the case with every functioning thing that exists. Every functioning thing that exists is a dependently arising phenomenon. So what we make a problem about with this idea of permanence, and we'll get into it a little bit. And permanence is the thing that is at the root, or is it causing all of our afflictive emotions. So let's talk now about gross and subtle impermanence. Is that clear about what we're talking about when we're talking about the emptiness of inherent existence? Or are there any questions about that?
I mean, I think it's a little confusing that you're saying emptiness of inherent existence. It might be better just saying the emptiness of phenomena.
No, you can't. Phenomena exist. Phenomena exist.
Yes, but they're empty.
They're empty of existing inherently. So that's what we're talking about. No, I'm implying. Here's what I'm implying it to. Emptiness.
They're either inherently existent or they're empty.
Or which almost means dependently arising. They exist dependently arising.
When you say the emptiness is inherent,
right. I know, that's why it's confusing, but that's how they use it. That's how they use it. So let me go back to that. It's the fact that the cup doesn't exist as an inherent thing. The fact is the thing, that's what's empty. That's what empty is, not the cup. Inherent existence, it's the fact. That fact will never change. That fact never changes for any functioning thing.
Do you mind if I'm gonna do it anyway. When you first presented this notion to me, emptiness of things was permanent, I found it helpful to think on a much more broad scale that all the phenomena in the universe exist in a perpetual state of dependent arising or
Mhm.
emptiness, and that was the permanent condition, if you will, of all phenomena, every type of phenomena. And that to me is what seemed more clear than applying. We make the mistake of imposing inherent existence on all phenomena.
Right.
And what you're saying, and so that's just a mistake we're making.
I
The
think
thing that's permanently empty empty or permanently in a state of dependent arising are phenomena.
yes, they're always in a state of dependent arising.
That's all. I just,
But that is not.
be clear.
Yeah. There's another way of saying that is that.
Let's say it a different way. It would still all be empty and independent arising, even if you were a Buddha and never made the mistake of perceiving them as inherently existing. The inherent existence factor is impermanent. What's permanent is the emptiness factor.
Yes.
That's all.
And what I said was, it's the emptiness of inherently existing phenomena. It's the emptiness of the of a phenomena that somehow exists.
By saying the term inherently existing phenomena, you're saying there are inherently existing phenomena.
No, what I'm saying is, it's the emptiness of that. There is no, it's in it, that inherently existing phenomena is an impossible way to exist, is what that says. It's impossible for an inherently existing
Right,
phenomena
but you
to exist and function.
They're something to be repeated, right? All they are is a mistaken notion.
It's a mistaken notion. The fact is that permanent thing can't possibly exist.
Yeah,
It- Nothing can function if it's
the
permanent.
emptiness applies to the phenomenon, not your.
Covita, unmute so we can hear. We're only getting half the debate.
Well, what's going to happen is, because we're both in the same room.
Yeah,
Mute
I
yourself.
can hear a little bit of it, and I'm like,
Christopher, mute yourself or turn off your speaker.
oh, I got you. You'll get feedback. Okay, no worries.
Okay, well, anyway.
Now this,
All I was saying is by
Houston.
saying the emptiness of inherent existence, you're making a mistake, in my opinion. This is just, I'm offering my opinion. Look, all phenomena, you could say, exist as either misapprehended as inherently existing, that is a mistake, or correctly apprehended as being a dependent arising, which we also refer to as empty. When we use the term empty, we're saying it's empty of what we mistakenly impose on it. It's empty.
Mistakenly impose on it.
Permanence.
So it's, and what is permanence?
You're trying to,
I mean, you're
Look,
mincing words here because this is.
I am mincing words.
This is the way.
The reason I understand. I am okay. Well, I would have this debate with them because my point the point I'm trying to make is we are so perpetually fixated on things existing inherently, and that we think there's such a thing as emptiness of inherent existence. Inherent existence is just a mistaken view.
That's right.
There is no mode called inherent existence.
It's an impossibility.
And so when it's almost like you concretize it by applying the state of emptiness upon a mistaken
Well,
view. I don't know.
this is Chris.
I know.
I mean, I sort of went through this myself. I mean, what do you mean?
Okay.
Emptiness of inherent existence. That's like saying inherent existence.
That's why I'm saying the non-red of blue. I mean,
But
really.
that's not how they're put. This is why it's such a difficult concept.
I think that we are so all Look, I know that we were all so habituated to looking at things and thinking, oh, look, that's there, there's that. And I commented to Krista yesterday, I was painting some things that were brown and I was making them white. And I said, it's amazing. I just painted this. And because of my sense faculty of vision, I look at it. And because of my habitual, perpetual way of concretizing things and thinking they are inherently existing out there, I just painted it and I think there's a white rail. It's kind of crazy. It's like we are imposing with our eyeballs, and they say this, we're projecting the permanence onto it.
Well, you're also projecting a label of what it is onto it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody found this debate useful, but
But no,
I mean, of course it is, because we have to think about this for ourselves, and we have to come to a conclusion for ourselves.
I'm going to mute myself
And
so
it
you
has
can.
to start.
Somebody's texting me. Shut up.
no, this is spot on. I mean, because and I used first of all, I used to get super tripped up on the permanence impermanence until I realized it was really a translation issue, and had a teacher clarify just flat out in Tibetan and say, look, it's takpa and mitakpa, which is changing and unchanging, and using that word just makes all the difference for me in understanding it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We have to define it. We have to define it.
But when it comes to the emptiness thing, and this is a huge thing, and it's something it would be fun to actually get together and really debate it in a proper manner, because I've had in certain teachings where the question comes up, okay, the emptiness of the cup, say, and when the cup breaks, that emptiness, where did it go? Did the emptiness go out of existence? Was there ever a real emptiness of the cup? And that's kind of getting a little bit at what I think Kavita's arguing against, and you're kind of arguing for, and it's very subtle.
One of the problems is that the teachers, they always use it in that terminology. Say the emptiness of the cup, and basically that's shorthand for saying the emptiness of the cup existing in some kind of impossible way. It's not possible that the cup could exist any other way than as a dependently arising phenomenon, as an impermanent, something that changes moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, and that's what permanence is. It doesn't change. It's like locked. This is where we come into all of our problems, though, with everything we view and every relationship we have.
So this is why I think it's really to add into your contemplation on this whole thing, to try to expand your thinking to the entire vast infinite universe, and that vast infinite universe is perpetually changing to and within that we mistakenly try to pin things down, but everything, your thoughts, your body, speech, and mind, all seemingly external phenomena, all phenomena in unknown and known worlds, all of it is perpetually in the state of transformation, changing. And so what we're trying, because
let me just finish.
All of it.
We're almost done with this. I want to finish up.
If you narrow it down too, it can help to think it that way as also in relation to a particular object such as a cup. It's good to remember that not only is the cup in this perpetual state, but it's just in one pinpoint of an entire expansive universe that is in this condition.
Yeah, but we project permanence onto relationships, and they're not. It doesn't exist. Relationships do not exist that way. So it's I want to finish this. There's not that much left.
Imagine there's such a thing as a relationship with one person and not someone else.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about gross and subtle impermanence. Within impermanence, we can talk about gross impermanence and subtle impermanence. An example of gross impermanence is when things break. We drop a glass and it shatters. That's gross impermanence. We can see it with our eyes. We can see something change with our eyes. It's like when a little sprout grows into a fully mature plant over time. That's gross impermanence. Usually it's little sprouts, tiny, and then there's this big plant. We can see it. Subtle impermanence, an example would be when scientists talk about the movement of electrons around a nucleus. Within all the atoms and molecules, everything is moving and changing all the time, but we can't see that. That would be subtle impermanence, an example of it. Gross impermanence is obviously easier to realize and understand than subtle impermanence because we can see it. But even with gross impermanence, we have a huge mental block against it. We see how strongly we grasp at the gross impermanence of things because of how we freak out when things change. When we have, just as an example, we have an antique that's been a family heirloom for generations and it breaks. Or an expensive plate that somebody knocks off the table and we have this feeling, wait, that's not supposed to happen. That plate can't break, or we feel like it's not in the nature of great-great-granny's Wedgwood teacup to break. Why is it breaking? We have trouble accepting even that kind of gross impermanence. Or we look into a mirror, we see more gray hair, more wrinkles, and we think, that's not supposed to happen to me. That happens to other people. Even with that kind of gross impermanence, our mind is so obscured by ignorance that we reject it and we fight against it, let alone subtle impermanence and just the fact that nothing remains the same from moment to moment. There's nothing to hold on to when we examine the subtle level of things. The ignorance in our mind stream is what obscures both the gross and subtle levels of impermanence, and we grasp at a lot of things as if they were permanent. Of course, intellectually, we can say, yes, everybody dies and my antiques break and the plate breaks. We say that intellectually, but we can feel actually where our real grasping lies. We just can't accept it when it happens. That shows there's a big difference between intellectually knowing something and actually integrating it into our lives so that it becomes a way of our relating to the world as our experience. It shows that intellectually knowing something does not do the trick of solving our problems. Intellectually understanding emptiness isn't going to solve our problems. We have to bring it into our experiential knowing where we can actually feel it and experience it. So here's the purpose of meditating on impermanence, is to bring the intellectual understanding of impermanence into our experiential understanding. The purpose of doing this meditation on impermanence or transience is so that at least when we are talking about gross impermanence, we bring our intellectual understanding of it into our experiential understanding of it. And similarly with subtle impermanence, we can all intellectually understand that electrons move around all the time, but we certainly don't have an experience that gives us an actual sense of that. The purpose of this meditation is to clarify our mind so that we perceive things more accurately. If we perceive things more accurately, we're going to have less problems in our lives than if we perceive them inaccurately. The other purpose of meditating on impermanence is to cut our attachment. Grasping at permanence is one of the underlying things that causes the arising of attachment. If we grasp at things as being permanent and unchanging, then they seem to us as if they really exist the way they appear to us, and it's really easy to get attached to them. For example, a relationship. grasping at permanence is what we do in relationships. We have a relationship with somebody. There's a part of our mind that thinks, this is it, this is lasting forever. Or this person is going to last forever somehow. In our mind, that's the way we feel. We become very attached to that idea. Because it appears permanent to us, we cling to it like a barnacle or something. It gives us the illusion that it is something stable and secure that we can rely on because it's always going to be there. It's never going to change. That's the way it appears to our mind of attachment. And so we get attached to it, we cling on to it. And then once we have this attachment, that's what sets us up for so much disappointment and pain, because the thing that we think is permanent and unchanging, like the relationship, is in reality changing moment by moment. At some point, the gross impermanence of a situation will become evident to us, and then we'll think, this isn't supposed to happen. This person I love isn't who I thought they were. Or this person I love isn't supposed to die. The relationship isn't supposed to end. Yes, I know about impermanence intellectually, but this really is not supposed to happen. We can see how grasping at permanence causes the attachment. And then because the attachment is out of sync with reality, when we were just talking about emptiness, it's out of sync with the reality because permanence is out of sync with reality. When the impermanent nature of a situation becomes evident, we experience a lot of pain. If we can get rid of the attachment, we can still relate to the person or the object. But when things change, we won't freak out because we haven't been clinging on to it as being permanent and always going to be there. So we can see that meditating on impermanence and permanence helps us to cut attachment. It's the third benefit of meditating on permanence and impermanence. It cuts our anger, it cuts our anxiety, and it cuts our depression. If we meditate on impermanence, it's also going to help us cut our anger, anxiety, and depression, because often when the thing we're attached to comes to an end, we get angry, or we get anxious and fearful, or we get depressed. So if we can get rid of our attachment, we can also get rid of those afflictive emotions, because we get angry or anxious or depressed in direct proportion to the amount of attachment we have for something. They go together. That's really important. This is the key to us finding some happiness here. It's very helpful to remember, for example, whenever we have pain or pleasure, that it's impermanent. Especially with pleasure, it's very important to remember that at some point that pleasure is going to end, and the happiness we experience will be like the happiness we experienced in last night's dream. None of it is existing and happening now. If we can remember that while we are experiencing pleasure, if we can remember that while we're experiencing pleasure, we won't cling to the pleasure. We can still experience the pleasure, we can still enjoy it, but we won't cling to it. Similarly, when we're experiencing pain, physical or emotional, we can remember that it too has the nature of being transient, of arising and ceasing. It's impermanent. Then our mind won't get so tight and wound up. Very often when we get depressed or when we go into crisis, it feels to us as if it's going to last forever. Our problem is never going to change. It's never going to go away. And we're going to be stuck right in the middle of it forever, like being in an eternal abyss. But if we can remember that the problem, the anxiety, the depression is something that comes into existence due to causes and conditions, therefore its very nature is that it changes and can change. It's not going to last forever. This is going to help us. We won't have so much anxiety and aversion. Then understanding emptiness, understanding impermanence and permanence also helps us very much to understand emptiness. It is actually the preliminary to understanding emptiness. The more we see that things are changeable, the more easily we can come to understand that therefore there is no solid essence of something inside anything to hold on to. No solid essence to hold on to. So, how to meditate on gross and subtle impermanence? Spending some time, and this is the last thing, spending some time thinking about both subtle impermanence and gross impermanence is really helpful. For subtle impermanence, we can just for now think about electrons moving around and the continual moments of our consciousness, like moments is like, each moment is like a snapping of the finger. They're here and they're gone. This is in our consciousness. It just goes, continually changing. This will give us some feeling for subtle impermanence. When we think about gross impermanence, this is where the 9-point meditation on death that we started with is beneficial, because what we're really contemplating is both the gross impermanence of our body and the gross impermanence of our lives. The 9-point meditation on death is really a big motivator that helps us gain energy to practice, because it poses the question, what is the meaning of life if at the end we die? What is really valuable in our life if at the end we leave behind our body, our wealth, our friends, and our relatives? If none of these comes with us, then what's really the valuable thing in our lives? That helps us to put into perspective how we want to live our lives so that our lives become very meaningful, that our goals are clear, and we can direct our energy in the most beneficial way for us and for everyone we come into contact with. So we're just a little behind here, and we can do go to the closing prayers. Prayers. Where are you, prayers? There it is. Prayers, where are you? You see the prayers? Yeah, okay. So let's do let's do the two dedications of merit. The Tibetan view, the Tibetan version, basically, may our mind of altruistic mind continue to grow, and may our understanding of emptiness, whatever little bit we understand, may that stick with us, and may it continue to grow. Jangchupsam chogrim poche ma kye panam kye gyochi kye panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du pelwar sho. Tongye tawa rinpoche ma kye panam kye gyochi kye panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du pelwa shyo. Okay, now let's see, I gotta stop our little recording here. Oh, you're recording, right? Yeah, you stop recording there. Okay, everybody.
Thanks, Christopher.
You're welcome. Great seeing you all. And I'll stick this on in an email. And you know, if you get a chance, if you have the time.